I never liked monkeys. Something about their eyes, too human, too knowing. My girlfriend, Sarah, thought they were cute. So, of course, we stopped at the primate house first. The smell hit me like a slap. Wet fur, urine, something sickly sweet. The orangutan sat in the far corner, arms wrapped around itself. A couple of capuchins screeched, fighting over a piece of fruit. But one monkey, small, black-eyed and grinning, pressed up against the glass, watching me. "Look at him. He likes you," Sarah laughed. The monkey's grin widened. I swear to God, its lips moved like it was trying to speak. Then it mimicked me. Every twitch, every blink. I raised my hand. It did the same. I turned my head. It mirrored me. Sarah moved on, but I couldn't. The monkey didn't break eye contact. It just grinned. And then it whispered something against the glass. It didn't make sense. A noise, a sigh, something almost like my own name. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. Sarah grabbed my arm, rolling her eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." That night, I woke up to a scratching noise. Soft, rhythmic. I turned my head and saw my reflection in the mirror. But it wasn't me. It was the monkey, grinning. I gasped and sat up too fast, my breath ragged in the dark. My eyes flicked to the mirror again, but now it was just my own pale face staring back at me. The room felt colder than it should have been. A weight pressed down on my chest, a pressure that wasn't quite physical but more like something watching, something waiting. I rubbed my hands together, trying to shake off the unease. Maybe I was just overtired. Maybe I had let that damn monkey get into my head. Sarah was asleep beside me, her breathing soft and steady. I didn't want to wake her, didn't want to sound crazy. So I lay back down and stared at the ceiling. But I left the light on. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. The brain does weird things when it's half asleep. I went through the motions, shower, coffee, pretending I wasn't rattled. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home. Sarah had a work trip coming up. She kissed me goodbye, told me to take it easy. "You've been acting weird since the zoo," she said. "Maybe don't spend all night on your phone reading creepy shit." I forced a laugh. Yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. By the time evening rolled around, the apartment felt wrong. I'd always been comfortable in my own space, but now it felt borrowed. Like someone else had been there before me, and they were still lingering just out of sight. I tried watching TV, but every time the screen went dark between scenes, I saw something in the reflection. A shape. Small, hunched. Watching. I turned the TV off. The scratching started again. I followed the sound to the bathroom mirror. My own reflection stared back at me, the way it always had. But something wasn't right. I moved closer. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then my reflection blinked. And I didn't. I stumbled backward, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. The thing in the mirror, not me, tilted its head. Then it smiled. I threw a towel over the mirror and backed out of the room. My breath came fast and shallow. I grabbed my phone and did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled monkey superstition. At first, it was just folklore. Tricksters, omens, spirits of the dead. But then I found a forum buried deep in the search results. Primate oddities. I clicked on a thread titled, "The Grinning Monkey. Has anyone else seen it?" The first post made my skin crawl. I saw it at a zoo when I was a kid. It mimicked me perfectly. Then that night, I started seeing it in my dreams. In mirrors. It whispered my name. It wanted me to let it in. The replies weren't much better. I saw it too. I thought I was crazy. It watches. It waits. And then the last comment. "If you see the monkey, don't look at it too long. And whatever you do, never let it touch you. It wants to trade places." I turned off my phone. The scratching sound had stopped. But the silence was worse. I stayed awake until dawn. When Sarah came home 2 days later, she found me exhausted, jumpy, paranoid. "You look like hell," she said, brushing a hand over my forehead. "Are you sick?" I told her everything. I expected her to laugh, but instead she frowned. "That's weird," she said slowly. "Because last night I woke up and I thought I saw you standing by the mirror. But you weren't moving." Cold dread crawled up my spine. "What do you mean?" I whispered. She looked away, uneasy. "I turned the light on, and you were still in bed. But when I looked back at the mirror, something else was there. Smiling. I wanted to throw up. That night, I covered every reflective surface in the apartment. Mirrors, windows, even the goddamn toaster. I didn't care how crazy I looked. I was not giving that thing another doorway. For a while, it seemed to work. Then the nightmares started. I dreamed I was in the zoo again, standing in front of the glass. But there was no reflection, just blackness. And inside that blackness, something moved. Slow, deliberate. A shape, curling and uncurling like a grin. And then I heard it whisper, "Let me in." I woke up choking on my own breath. The towel I had put over the bathroom mirror was on the floor. My reflection was grinning. And then it stepped forward. It took a single step out of the mirror, and I swear, for one horrifying second, I felt something cold and wrong brush against my arm. I lunged for the light, flicked it on, and it was gone. But the mirror was still empty. I did what any sane person would do. I packed a bag and drove straight to a motel. The receptionist gave me a weird look when I asked if the rooms had mirrors. She said no. I almost cried from relief. I didn't sleep. The next day, I drove back to the zoo. The primate house was nearly empty. But the monkey was there, waiting. It pressed up against the glass, grinning. I took a deep breath. My hands trembled. "What are you?" I whispered. The monkey's lips moved. I swear to God it said, "You." I turned and ran. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes, Sarah's worried voice, a doctor's office, someone handing me a cup of water. They said I had a breakdown, said I needed rest. But I know the truth, because when they handed me a mirror to check my bruises, I saw it. The monkey wasn't there anymore, and the reflection looking back at me wasn't me. I always loved the reptile house. The air was thick and humid, clinging to my skin like a second layer. The scent of damp moss and stale water sat heavy in my lungs. The glass enclosures were fogged from the heat, their insides like miniature swamps where ancient creatures slithered and coiled. It was quiet in there, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, makes you feel like something is lurking just beyond what you can see. Most people rush through, stopping only for a quick glance at the bigger attractions. The crocodiles, the cobras, the massive python coiled around a dead tree branch like a curse. But I liked to linger. That day, I wandered the aisles, taking my time. I watched a Komodo dragon flick its tongue at the glass, its black eyes unreadable. A row of crocodiles lay perfectly still, so motionless they might have been statues. A black mamba twisted around a branch, its body sleek and deadly. And then I saw him. One of the zookeepers stood near the anaconda's tank, whispering. He was tall and lanky, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. His uniform hung loose on his frame, like it had once belonged to someone bigger. He had the look of a man who hadn't slept in years. His lips barely moved, but I heard his voice, soft, rhythmic, seeping through the heavy air like something alive. I edged closer, my heart picking up pace. "Feed soon, he's ready." I frowned. Who was ready? The anaconda? The snake was staring at him. Its yellow eyes flickered like dying lanterns, unblinking, locked onto the man with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Then suddenly, those golden eyes flicked to me. The air around me felt colder, even in the humid heat. I should have turned around and walked out of there. I should have left it alone. But I didn't. I followed him. The zookeeper turned and walked down a narrow hallway, away from the main exhibit. He didn't glance back, didn't hesitate. He knew I was behind him. The hallway twisted, dimly lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. It smelled different back here, not like the carefully maintained habitats outside, but something older, wetter. The scent of standing water, of things left too long in the dark. I hesitated when we reached a door. Employees only. The zookeeper pushed it open without a second thought. And I, like a fool, followed him inside. The room beyond was massive, stretching into shadows that the overhead lights didn't quite reach. The air was thick, heavy, like the belly of something alive. The first thing I noticed was the glass tank. It was enormous, bigger than any enclosure I had seen in the main exhibit. It took up the entire back wall, a window into something murky and deep. Something moved inside. Slow, deliberate. A shape, shifting beneath the water's surface. I stepped closer, my breath fogging the glass. And then I saw them. The faces. Half submerged, their skin gray and bloated, their eyes open and empty. mouths frozen in silent screams. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was a trick of the light, some weird exhibit meant to be artistic. But then one of the faces moved. A hand, limp and boneless, floated up from the depths. Fingers twitched. The body shifted, a ripple disturbing the still water. Not fake. Not a trick. Real. I turned to run, and slammed straight into the zookeeper. He didn't flinch. His sunken eyes were calm. Expectant. "Some things," he said, his voice low and even, "need fresh meat." A noise rose behind me, something shifting in the water. I shoved him hard and bolted for the door. My shoulder slammed into it so hard I thought I heard something crack. But I didn't care. I had to get out. The hallway twisted and stretched, the walls narrowing. My own breath thundered in my ears. Behind me, I heard something wet and heavy dragging across the floor. I didn't look back. I reached the exit and burst into the night air, the zoo's lights blinding after the darkness inside. I ran. I didn't stop until I was home, until I locked my doors, until I shoved a chair under the handle like a kid afraid of the monster under the bed. I told myself I imagined it. I had to imagine it. But that night, when I closed my eyes, I saw the faces. Floating in the dark, their mouths still open. And just before sleep finally dragged me under, I swore I heard them whisper, "Feed soon." The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick. Sarah, my girlfriend, was surprised. "You never take days off." I forced a laugh. Guess I finally needed one. But the truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I woke up to a noise. A soft, wet slithering sound. My stomach clenched. I turned my head slowly, and saw the outline of something huge pressed against my bedroom window. The glass was fogged with moisture, the shape behind it shifting, twisting. I saw an eye, yellow, reptilian, watching me through the glass. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the sound of water dripping onto my floor. When I woke up, the window was dry. But there were footprints. Wet, leading from the window to my bed. And beside my pillow, a single scale. Large. Slick. Waiting. Lions weren't supposed to cry. But this one did. It was late afternoon, the sky bruised with the first hints of dusk. The zoo was quieter now, the earlier crowds thinning out as families gathered their things and left. The air smelled like damp fur, hot pavement, and the last traces of funnel cake. I liked zoos, but only when they were nearly empty. When it was just me and the animals, the barriers between us seeming thinner somehow. That's when I saw him. A lone male lion, standing near the edge of his enclosure. His golden mane was dull, his ribs faintly visible beneath his fur. He wasn't like the other lions, no lounging in the shade, no lazy flicking of the tail. He was pacing, back and forth, back and forth. The movement was sharp, jerky, almost like he was agitated. And then, as I watched, a tear slid down his furred cheek. I froze. Lions don't cry. I stepped closer to the railing, gripping the metal bar so tight my knuckles turned white. Maybe it was just sweat, or some kind of discharge from an infection. Maybe. He stopped. Just like that. His pacing ended mid-step, one paw still lifted off the ground. He turned his head and locked eyes with me. I couldn't move. Something about those eyes, deep, golden, too aware. Then it happened. A voice. Not out loud. Not from his mouth. Inside my head. "Help me." My stomach dropped. I staggered back, breath hitching. No, that didn't just happen. It couldn't have. I glanced around, half expecting to see some hidden speaker, some zoo gimmick I hadn't noticed before. But there was nothing. Just me, the lion, and the dying light of the sun. I looked back at him. He hadn't moved. His stare hadn't wavered. And that's when I saw them. The scars. Deep, unnatural slashes carved into his side. Not claw marks from a fight. Not the rough wounds of an animal battle. These were precise. Like something had been cut out of him. A shadow flickered in my peripheral vision. A hand landed on my shoulder. I jerked away with a gasp, turning to see a man in a faded zoo uniform. A zookeeper. He was smiling. But it was wrong. Too smooth, too wide, like his face had been stretched to fit the expression. "You should leave," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Rehearsed. I swallowed hard, glancing back at the lion. He was still staring at me. And then one last time I heard it, his voice in my head. No, it's not me. It's inside me. A chill ran through me deep in my bones. The zookeeper's grip tightened. Just a fraction. Just enough to make me realize I had no choice. I nodded, muttered something about how it was getting late. And then I walked away. I never found out what he meant. At least, I thought I didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the lion's eyes. Kept hearing those words over and over. It's inside me. I told myself I was just imagining things. That my brain was twisting reality, making something out of nothing. Then my phone buzzed. I frowned, grabbing it off the nightstand. Unknown number. I hesitated, then opened the message. Don't come back. I sat up fast, my breath catching in my throat. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. The message was vague, but I knew. It had something to do with the lion. Something to do with whatever had been cut out of him. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. I stayed awake for hours, phone in my hand, waiting. Waiting for something I wasn't sure I wanted. A week passed. I avoided the zoo, though I thought about it constantly. Then one night I saw it on the news. Breaking. Senior zookeeper killed in mysterious animal attack. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. The article was vague. Said the man's body had been found near the lion enclosure. That the wounds were extensive, but not consistent with an animal attack. I searched for more details. And then I found them. A leaked photo. The man's body was torn apart. But not by something. From the inside. Like something had clawed its way out. I stopped breathing. I remembered the scars. The lion's voice in my head. It's inside me. Had they put something in him? Experimented on him? And had it finally gotten free? I shut my laptop. My hands were shaking. That night, I locked my doors. Pulled the curtains tight. Tried to pretend I wasn't afraid. But in the middle of the night, I woke up. A sound outside. Low. Deep. A growl. Not from a lion. Something bigger. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. And then, a shadow passed by my window. Huge. Hulking. Not human. My heart stopped. I didn't look. I couldn't. But I felt it. Felt it watching me. And in my head, I heard it one last time. I'm free. I always wondered what went on after hours at the zoo. It started as a passing thought when I was a kid, staring at the empty cages just before closing time, watching the animals shift and twitch, as if they knew their real lives began once the visitors left. As an adult, I stopped thinking about it, until Dave made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Dave was an old buddy from high school, the kind of guy who never really grew up. He bounced between jobs, mostly in security because he liked the quiet. Said it gave him time to think. He had been working night shifts at the zoo for about 6 months when he called me up one evening. You ever wanted to see what happens after closing? It was a weird question. I mean, I guess, I said. Why? Come by tonight. You'll see. That was all he said. Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I showed up anyway. The zoo felt different at night. Not just empty, wrong. During the day, it was filled with noise and movement. Families pushing strollers, kids screaming, the smell of popcorn and sunscreen in the air. At night, everything was still. No music. No chatter. Just the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional sound of an animal shifting in the darkness. And the smell different. Less like hot pavement and fried food, more like damp fur and something else. Something old. Dave met me by the employee entrance. His face was pale, his eyes a little too wide. You ready? He asked. I nodded. We walked past the visitor areas, down narrow paths lined with enclosures. The tigers were curled in the shadows, barely visible. The giraffes stood still, their long necks angled slightly, watching. The flamingos were silent, heads tucked beneath their wings. Then we passed the hyena exhibit. One of them was sitting up, staring at me. It wasn't laughing, just watching. I slowed down, feeling the weight of its gaze. Something about it made my stomach twist. Dave smirked. Creepy, right? Yeah, I muttered. They know it's feeding time. I frowned. I thought zoos fed their animals on a schedule. Dave just smiled. Come on. You want to see something cool? I hesitated. Something in his voice, excitement, but also something else. Something off. But curiosity got the better of me. I followed him down a restricted path, past a set of locked gates, to a rusted steel door. "This is where the real feeding happens," he said, pulling out a key. The lock clinked. The door swung open. And the smell hit me. Rotten meat. Blood. Something thick and wet in the air. I gagged. Jesus, what the hell? Then I heard it. A sound from the darkness ahead. A shuffle. A dragging step. Dave stepped inside, motioning for me to follow. The overhead light flickered, barely illuminating the narrow corridor beyond. The walls were concrete, smeared with something dark. I swallowed hard. "What is this place?" Dave didn't answer. We walked deeper inside. The tunnel stretched ahead, twisting into shadow. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me like a thick, damp blanket. Then Dave stopped. And I saw them. Bodies. Hanging like meat. At first, I thought they were just animal carcasses. It made sense, right? Predators need food. Then I saw the clothes. Some still had them on. Jeans. A tattered jacket. A single white sneaker. My brain stuttered, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I saw the faces. Their eyes were open, mouths frozen mid-scream. My stomach lurched. I turned to Dave, my throat dry. "What the fuck is this?" His expression didn't change. He just pointed. I followed his gaze to the floor. And I saw footprints. Bare, human footprints. Leading away from the hanging bodies. Leading deeper into the tunnel. Something shifted in the darkness ahead. A low growl rumbled through the air. A shape moved. Slow, deliberate. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. Dave called my name, but I didn't stop. Didn't turn back. I just ran. The steel door loomed ahead, and for one horrifying second, I thought it would be locked. I slammed into it, shoving it open. The night air hit me like a slap. I turned, gasping, expecting Dave to be right behind me. But he wasn't. The door swung shut. I heard something on the other side. A scream. Then silence. I didn't wait. I ran until I was outside the zoo, breath burning in my lungs. I never went back. A week later, I saw the news. A security guard had gone missing. Dave. No body was found. Just his uniform. Left outside the steel door. Like something had peeled him out of it. And now, some nights, when I'm lying awake, I swear I can still hear it. That low, hungry growl. Waiting. Penguins. Harmless, right? That's what I thought. They waddle, they swim, they look like tiny men in tuxedos. People love them. Kids press their faces against the glass, pointing and laughing as the birds dive into the water. That's what I expected when I stopped by the penguin exhibit that evening. It was late, almost closing time. The crowds had thinned, the zoo's speakers echoing their usual announcement. The zoo will be closing in 15 minutes. Please make your way to the exits. I should have left. But then I saw the sign. A laminated placard, zip-tied to the railing. The words were printed in bold red letters. Do not make eye contact with the penguins. I frowned. What kind of rule was that? Maybe some kid had gotten pecked because he got too close. Maybe the zookeepers were trying to prevent aggression. Still, I'd never heard of anything like it. I stepped closer to the railing and looked down into the exhibit. The penguins were huddled together on the artificial ice, their sleek black bodies glistening under the dim zoo lights. Their little heads twitched from side to side as they preened their feathers. Then, all at once, they stopped. Their black, beady eyes locked onto mine. A chill ran through me. It wasn't normal. Animals don't just stop like that. Not all at once, not with that kind of focus. For a moment, I thought maybe I was imagining things. But no, they were staring. One of them, a little taller than the rest, broke from the group. It waddled forward, slow and deliberate. Something about its movement was wrong. Too smooth. Too knowing. Its head tilted. And then it blinked. Not like a normal bird. Not up and down. Sideways. Like a lizard. I felt a prickle of cold sweat on my skin. That's when I heard it. A whisper, not out loud but inside my head. You see us. I took a step back. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Another whisper. You see us. The penguins moved in unison, all of them facing me now. a dozen pairs of black eyes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I turned to leave. Then I saw it, a shadow in the water. I snapped my gaze back to the tank. The penguin that had stepped forward, it wasn't there anymore. I scanned the exhibit, my pulse pounding. And then I felt it, a presence behind me. I turned. The penguin stood behind me, outside the enclosure. That wasn't possible. My breath hitched. My legs locked in place. It shouldn't have been able to climb out. The walls were too high, the glass too smooth. But there it was, standing too still, too close. Its head twitched. Another whisper slithered into my mind. Closer. I bolted. I ran through the zoo, past empty exhibits, past darkened walkways, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I don't remember reaching the parking lot. I don't remember unlocking my car. I just remember slamming the door shut, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. For a long moment, I just sat there, trying to catch my breath. Then curiosity got the better of me. I looked back at the zoo entrance. The penguins were still there, watching, waiting, and one by one, they began to smile. But that wasn't the end of it. I went home that night, locking every door behind me. My apartment felt too quiet. I turned on the TV for noise, but my skin still crawled. I kept thinking about that penguin. How it had been outside the enclosure. How it had whispered to me. It was past midnight when I finally tried to sleep. I tossed and turned for hours, my dreams filled with flashes of black and white bodies shifting in the dark. Then I heard it. A soft, wet slap, like something waddling across the floor. I jolted upright. My bedroom door was open. I knew I had closed it. And in the doorway, a shape. Small, black and white. Too still, too silent. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. The shape didn't move, but I felt it watching me. Closer. I threw the lamp at it. The crash sent shadows skittering across the room. The shape vanished. I didn't sleep after that. Morning couldn't come fast enough. As soon as the sun rose, I packed a bag. Called my boss. Told him I was taking a leave of absence. I drove out of town. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Just kept driving until the city was behind me. But I still feel them. Watching. Waiting. And sometimes in the dead of night, I hear that whisper. Closer.